Welcome to the next presentation in the How to Start a Writing Paper series. This one's on brainstorming and gathering ideas. We're going to get into some brainstorming strategies here, and again, this will somewhat follow our book so that it kind of makes sense going through looking at both things at once. But I'll expand on these for you a little bit at a time. The first idea that they talk about is find routines that support thinking. And I didn't list this with the strategies, but I want to talk about this just for a minute. It's very important that as a student you start getting more in tune with your own biorhythms. And I know that can sound really freaky and out there, but really what that means is knowing what your body does best at a certain time. For example, I know that after lunch I fall asleep. And I discovered this when I was a college student and I would take classes in the afternoon right after lunch, and I would fall asleep every single day in class after lunch. That's what my body wanted to do, and I really couldn't help it. And I felt bad and I felt terrible, but that's what happened. So for me, doing a lot of creative and brainstorming thinking in the early afternoon is a terrible idea. It doesn't happen for me. Other people, though, that's when they thrive. Other people works in the morning. Other people prefer to do it in the evening, late at night. Find what works for your brain and your body, and support your brain and body in that. Give yourself plenty of fuel, exercise as you need to, all of those things. And they talk about having good routines with that too. Figure out what your body needs to do best with this, whether it's going into doing some exercise at a certain time every day, or maybe it's, after you get done with doing things, you grab some coffee and sit down and sort of relax for a few minutes, but let your brain get a little bit hyped as you get some ideas. Find out what works for you. Okay, so getting into more specific strategies here. First, you can build lists. And this one is pretty straightforward. Again, when you're coming up with a topic, you've read the prompt, you know kind of what you're supposed to do. You're still kind of figuring it out, but you're coming up with ideas, so you can build, just write down ideas and lists. Don't filter yourself too much. Don't feel like you have to write in complete sentences or anything like that. Just straight up ideas. And again, hopefully you're reading the specific paragraphs in the book right now. Feel free to pause this presentation as we're going through so you can slow down and actually read from the book to see what the book says. I don't want to have to read that to you. Another is map your ideas. And there are different ways of doing this. We can see pictures here in our text if we look at it. There are other ideas as well. I'm going to get into this a little bit more with clustering. We're going to come back to that. Another idea is free writing. And the book gives some good details on how to do that. I'll let you kind of look through those on your own and see what it actually means. But free writing is helpful for a lot of students. The reason I find free writing very helpful is I tend to filter myself. I tend to stop myself and want to correct errors before I let ideas come out. So free writing allows us to let those ideas spill out and go forth, and sometimes the things that might seem ridiculous to us when we're thinking about them, once they actually come out, we think, I could actually do this, and we come up with our best ideas that way. We can also browse online for ideas, sometimes reading a little bit more about a topic you might want to research, or if you are given a topic, you might want to just browse around and see what ideas comes along. And we'll talk as we go along about narrowing topic ideas. That's always a good thing. And browsing just the internet or an encyclopedia or other things can really help us with that. We can also start writing out questions. And we've talked already about taking prompts and flipping them into questions. I won't revisit that, but just saying what questions does this bring to mind and then going from there. And then clustering, aka spoken or mapping, we'll get into in the next section here.
And we can see an example of clustering in action. In case you're not familiar with this is how it works. You start with the very broad topic idea. You go from there, really. So in this case, they started with diet, it looks like. Maybe they started with obesity in children. It can be a little hard to tell here where exactly it started. But let's say in this case, they started with obesity in children. That one's in the orange, if you can see colors. And so we see they've marked that as where they started. So they started knowing they wanted to write a paper about obesity in children. However, they knew that number one, they were going to need some specific points to cover, and really that's probably too broad of a topic, so they want to narrow their topic down as well. So you can see that they came up with a list of 4 things that spoke out or come out from obesity in children. From the top to the right and then down, health problems later in life, diet, exercise, and genetics. And then they took those various things and they didn't really decide they wanted to get into genetics, but they looked at the health problems, they looked at the diet and the exercise, and they started putting bubbles out from those. And so they spoke out a bubble from each of those, and those broke down into two or three different ideas. And you can see from there, some of those were actually connected to each other, and that helps them decide what they want to write about. That's a very helpful technique. I find it helpful to do this either on some paper. Sometimes you can go into a classroom, or if you're on campus, you can even come by my office and we'll go through and do some of this together. I'm happy to do that. They'll help you in the writing center. I keep a whiteboard in my office specifically so that I can work with students individually on some things. And so, again, if you're on campus and you want to stop by my office and we can do this and run through this on a whiteboard, I'd be happy to do that. We could possibly even set something online where we can do this through a video chat as well. This is very, very helpful. And then what you do is you go back through and you decide what things are really important, what things you really want to focus on. And you've done the same for your free writing, just leave a whole couple of pages of text. You go back through and highlight what's important, where you can go from there. And then even sometimes, both with a free writing and with a clustering, you would take some of your key ideas from that and then start a new cluster or start a new free writing piece from those and go from there. That'll really help you narrow down your topics and help you get some idea on what support points you want as well. Another great strategy for getting started on your papers is to employ what's called smart reading. This helps you as you're starting to research. This helps you as you're starting to also come up with ideas. Oftentimes, we research as we're still coming up with ideas, and this will really help you with that. Here's some ways to do that. First, you read into deepen what you already know. What that means is there are some things that you already know in life, and many of us don't know a whole lot about too many things. But oftentimes you at least know a little bit about a topic before you start writing about it. Sometimes you already have some great ideas. So when you read, don't just look for background information that tells you things that you already know. Now, sometimes we need that background information because we don't know much of anything at all, or we want to make sure that we have our facts right. But oftentimes, if we know a little bit about our topic before we start reading, we need to read in things that will really deepen our knowledge. And what I really recommend is read things that get into more specific aspects as well. Often students will just find as many easy to find Google sources that just scrape the surface of something rather than digging into the actual content. Another idea is to read above your level of knowledge. Look at things that are hard to read. And quite honestly, many students come into college and they're lazy. And some of them are intentionally lazy. They want to do as little work as possible. Other students don't realize that they're lazy. Many times in high school, quite honestly, people haven't been challenged. Other people come into college and they've maybe had a number of years that they weren't in school and they didn't really use their mind in an academic way. They used it in other ways and they did great things, but they weren't using it in an academic way. And so as a result, many students, when they encounter articles or books that are a little difficult to read or that have ideas they don't completely understand, they say, well, I guess I'm too stupid, or hey, this is too hard for me. They put it down and they leave it. And in college writing, you have to challenge yourself. You have to read things that you don't understand the first time. That's okay. That's the whole point. And if you want somebody, myself as an instructor or another instructor for another class or the writing lab people, we can sit down and read through things with you and help you better understand them. You also want to read what makes you uncomfortable. Read things that you don't necessarily agree with. As an academic, as a scholar, you are not being forced to always take sides on everything. You're also going to be asked to read things that you don't agree with. And oftentimes, we all have a worldview that we share, and we have worldviews that may contradict things that people around us believe, and that's okay. As a scholar and as an academic, you're not going to be asked to change all of your beliefs. Nobody here is going to tell you that you need to believe a completely different set of things. However, you do need to read things that will make you uncomfortable because that will make you more challenge in your thought, oftentimes that will help you know why you believe or uh, agree with something that you agree with or that you believe. But oftentimes that will help you take on a more intellectual course for it. So read the things that are uncomfortable for you to read. Read against the grain. What that means is that as you read things, don't just swallow it. Don't just say, well, this must be true. The person writing it sounds smart. In the academic world, in the college world, many brilliant people disagree with each other. Many brilliant people, many people who have done a ton of research, not only disagree with each other, but disagree on fundamental philosophies. And again, that's okay. That's the way the world is supposed to work. And you're now a part of that, and that's a great thing. So as you read, challenge things. Make notes on the side where you say, is this really true? Do more research. Or, I don't have the same interpretation. Yes, often these people have done more research and spent more time studying things than you, but you're not going to get to where they are. You're not going to get to be a good student without challenging those things and thinking through them. You also want to read slowly. There is a time to skim just to find out what is in a source. And then once you decide a source is going to work pretty well for you, you want to read slowly through it. Give yourself some time, really chew on it. And then annotate what you read. And we've talked about this in other presentations, but write notes in the side. That's very helpful. You also want to consult experts. We can see a picture, and I think they posed for this picture very interested and surprised and fascinated looks on their faces. And I'm sure that's a posed picture. But I love that picture because it does show the importance that an expert can bring to a conversation. And there you have someone who is now a retired professor from Ancilla College, longtime professor in science, and he really knew his stuff. And so, if I were writing a paper on science, I don't know a lot about science. That's not my field. I'm interested in a lot of things, but I don't know. So, if I'm going to write something about it, I'm going to go consult somebody who knows a lot more than I do. That makes sense. Academics and researchers and scholars and professors do that. So, you as students definitely should do that. So, some experts that you can consult include your instructors in different subjects, the writing lab, they can help you find things, people who are other experts. So, for example, we have students here who are criminal justice majors. Well, if you're a criminal justice major, probably going to talk to a sheriff or somebody from the Indiana State Police would be a really good expert to talk to. Librarians can help get you in contact with great information, and you might even have some peers who are experts on things as well. You'd be surprised the background that some of your fellow students have. And sometimes in an on campus classroom, it's easier to get a hold of those things and get a sense of those things. Online classroom, however, sometimes we don't know what our peers are good at. But I encourage you to kind of chat with other people, and as we have discussion groups, pay attention and see if you can learn more about what other people might be experts in. They have a really great visual on how to use the Writing Center. I encourage you to look through that as we're talking here. You want to bring materials with you to the Writing Center. Don't just show up out of nowhere. And you want to use your session not as a time to just try to pry information and help out of people, but actually interact with them. And then you're going to have a tutor working with you and write notes, take notes, and work with that person. Again, give you a place to start and keep working wherever you're at in your work. And then you can go from there and work. You don't necessarily need to keep consulting with them every 5 minutes, but they can be very helpful for you. So I encourage you to look at that. Our Writing Center and Ancilla College is up in the library, and I encourage you to go check them out and work with them as often as you can.